Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to our second module of the US SMB Global Business Academy. It's really a pleasure for me and my friend Karen Parker from US Commercial Services to give you a welcoming today. We have a great topic to cover today. I'm a customs nerd, so I am partial to this topic today. So I am very excited and look forward to it. Karen, how are you today?
Great. Thank you, Maria Luisa. I'm excited for this program today.
Yes, we are going to cover, we go to the next slide. And before we go forward, I'm sorry, I always am remiss to say thank you to all the partners that have helped us promote this event, and to all of you for being here today. For those of you that are here live, and those of you that are watching us now in recording. It's really I think when we talk about education and supporting and sharing knowledge about how to expand your business, the community is the one that comes together. And I love seeing all the logos that we have in our screen of all the partners that are helping us to promote this across the country. Thank you to all of you for being part of this effort. For this strategic partnership between US Commercial Service and UPS is really an honor to partner with you. So let's move to the next one. So last week, we had a very interesting, the next slide, we had a very interesting conversation about the commercial, and you can go back, RJ, thank you. The learning from the agencies about what is available, what resources, what programs we have. And Karen, we had very good information there from Exim Bank, from US Commercial Services, from the Small Business Administration. Today, Karen, a senior international trade specialist with US Commercial Services, and I will be moderating a very interesting topic about tariffs, Incoterms, and more. And please don't hang up or don't leave right now, because I know those terms might sound a little bit unknown to some of you, but this is why it's important about having this capacity building, right? That we're going to learn about topics that are going to help you to be successful, make better choices, and at minimum to learn what questions to ask when you're going to expand your business and export. So in the next slide, we're going to see what is our focus for our objectives for this academy. And we really want to focus on providing you capacity building in terms of understanding and looking at topics that are important for you from a UPS perspective. This is what we see around the globe and here in the US, is what are those topics that we keep seeing and hearing from our customers, from small businesses, that are important. And so capacity building is always an important element of this area. And the second part that for us, UPS, and for commercial services is important is access to markets. You need to diversify your markets. How do we help you achieve that? So that's what we are building. These are the building blocks of our models that we're going to have. So in our next slide, I am honored to introduce to you the two speakers, wonderful speakers that we're going to have join us today. I promised them that I was going to do a brief introduction because I want to give them the time more for them to talk about it. And I'm very honored and excited to have Ms. Elise Erickson, Betty Sue Export Queen, Export Connector from the company Export Connector, an entrepreneur herself, who's going to share with us her insights. Elise has more than 25, 30 years of experience, and she started when she was 5. I agree to that number. We all started when we were 5. So Elise, thank you so much for being here with us today. And then we have Ms. Robin Usherwood, who I have the honor and the pleasure also of working together with her here at UPS, Director of Marketing for US Exports in the US. Robin also started at 5. We were very precocious children, all of us here in the screen, with over 15 years of experience in this topic, very important information. So while we stop sharing the screen, I'm going to turn it over to Elise. Robin, thank you. May the force be with both of you in the presentation. Some logistics as we are stop sharing and Elise can share the screen. If you have questions, please use your Q&A box that you see in the bottom where you can put the questions. We will be monitoring the questions as we move forward. Also, if you want to tell us from where you are and what you're doing, use the Q&A box to type in there. That the chat function is not on. And yes, you will receive the presentation. We will be sending you last week's and today's together. So you will be receiving that today, and the recordings, all of them will be available at the end of the 4th module. So with that, Elise, I turn it over to you, and thank you so much for being here today with us.
How's
And
that?
yes,
Now you can hear me, right?
right.
Okay. So the question for the day is, can you solve the riddle of the exporter? In case you haven't heard the riddle, it goes like this. I'm a USPPI with a product that's an EAR 99, not on the CCL, and going to somewhere not X'd on the CCC and not to an SDN. Am I okay? Do I contact the DOC or the BIS? And do I need an HTS or an ECCN to file my EEI with the AES, now the ACE? Do I ship it FCA or CIP? And just to make sure I CMA, cover my ass, do I use an LC? You tell me. So before you panic and say you cannot solve the riddle of the exporter, we're going to show you in this session and the next 3 sessions how you can solve the riddle of the exporter. And our goal is one goal: to get you excited about exporting. So welcome to Module 2, Incoterms, Tariffs, and more. I'm going to kind of show you how they fit in the big picture process. Now, you probably already figured out it's a lot of information. I speak really quickly. Don't worry, there's a PDF that will come your way. My name is Elise Erickson. Thank you for the nice introduction. Yes, I did start exporting when I was 5. But most people think if you teach or train in exporting that you're a trainer. I'm really not a trainer by heart. My background is concrete manufacturing. So I was the owner of 2 companies, Classic Cast Stone that does cast concrete, and Slate Select, which is a simulated roofing with GFRC. Now, I learned about export there, import in that and other ventures, and I made some big mistakes. I ended up director of training at the International Trade Center, SBDC, and it was unbelievable information. I thought if I knew then what I know now, I would have been much more successful. The one thing I did see, it's really hard for people to absorb this. So like a typical entrepreneur, someone from Guam with the SBDC said, Elise, can you come up with an export training that doesn't put people to sleep in 5 minutes? As a typical entrepreneur, I said, sure, I could do that. 2 weeks later, I was in Guam and Betty Sue was born. So what we do is we have export training for entrepreneurs by an entrepreneur. Now, here's my problem with a lot of the times with training with exporting. It's like a whack-a-mole game. You hit one topic and then another. What we do is the riddle of the exporter 8-step process. Step 1 is getting started. Step 2 is market research. Step 3 is market entry. Step 4 is legal. Step 5 is compliance. Step 6 is transportation. Step 7 is payments and finance. And the most important step of all is culture. But we want to give you a start to finish process that makes it easier for you to swallow. And what we're going to do today, we're going to hit a few of the steps and show how it fits in with Incoterms, tariffs, and more. Now, typical trainer, as we go along, there's going to be a little quiz for you. There are 2 numbers and 2 sentences that are the most important in exporting, and we'll fill those in as we go along. Now, if we're going to learn to export, we need a client, right? So Betty Sue, Export Queen, is our client. She is from Cactus, Texas. Now, she could be from Cactus, she could be from Boring, Oregon, or Santa Claus, Indiana, or Ponce, Puerto Rico, or she could even be from Toadsuck, Arkansas. And yes, there is a Toadsuck, Arkansas. But what Betty Sue really represents is the ingenuity and the drive that small business owners have every day. So Betty Sue has a variety of products. Here's her Texas tongue torch sauce, her sunscreen, her rattlesnake olive oil, which is a real rattlesnake olive oil. You can buy it online. And her newest invention or product is Betty Sue's rhinestone-studded night vision goggles. So what we're going to do today, and it's what I do in all my trainings, we're going to help Betty Sue follow the path to get her products from Texas to her client, Fiona Finn, in Australia. And of course, Betty Sue has a little Hollywood story. Now, before we get into the depth of it, I think there's a few things that you need to know before you get kind of like a trip. Here's the one: export here equals import there. That is exporting in one sentence. What does it take to get my product out of the US? And what does it take to get it into the other country? So there's your number 1 sentence: export here equals import there. Now, the second thing is who can export. Any US citizen or legal resident has the privilege of exporting, but certain products or orders may require an export license. Why do we need an export license? We do not want anything that is exported that could harm our citizens or our military. So we need to ask this at the very beginning: do I need an export license? And there's 4 questions. What is my product? Where is it going? Who is it going to? And how will it be used? Well, obviously, the rattlesnake olive oil does not present a problem. However, Betty Sue's rhinestone-studded night vision goggles are what is called a dual-use item. It is a commercial product that has potential military use. And yes, that will need an export license. And remember, if your product, even if it's as simple as paper clips, it cannot go to the bad guys or the embargoed countries. The last thing we want to do in our know before you go section is what I call the infamous Incoterms. They're a set of acronyms. There's 11 in total. You've probably seen some of these, and they define the task, the cost, and the risk from shipping the product from the seller to the buyer. So this is your responsibility. Now, why do I call them the infamous Incoterms? Because if you don't pay attention to what you've obligated yourself for, as Forrest Gump would say, it might come bite you in the buttocks. So you need to think before you ship. And your BFF, your freight forwarder, can help you. So we're just going to touch on step 1, getting started. There are 2 types of exporters. There's accidental, someone contacts you, and there's intentional, and if you plan it. And in step 1, you're going to determine if you have what it takes. And these are some of the things. The main thing is, do you have a viable product that can be adapted for foreign markets? Now, the other thing you're going to determine in step 1 is, are you going to export directly or indirectly? If you export directly, you and your company are going to handle every step of the 8-step process. If you do it indirectly, you will either have a third-party fulfillment handle some or all of these steps. Look at this. We're on step number 2, market research. Now, this is the most important number in exporting. It's called the harmonized tariff schedule. Everything in the world has a number. A pen has a number. A phone has a number. These cows have a number. It's part of the larger harmonized tariff schedule. In the US, we call this number a Schedule B, but you'll hear it referred to as different things: harmonized code, harmonized tariff schedule, Schedule B. So it is actually a 10-digit number, and the first 6 digits will match the US or Japan or Brazil. They used to tell us only to put 6 but they're now asking us to do all 10. So just remember, your product, everything has to have this. And you'll see the more numbers are added to it, the more we learn about our cows. These are particularly dairy cows. So it tells you a lot about your product. If you can remember that the HTS is like a big, big book, it will be easier to understand. So obviously the cows are chapter 1, live animals, but if you have ceramic products, that's chapter 69. If you have toys, games, and sports, that'll be chapter 96. So there we are, one sentence, one number, we're ready to move on. How do we find it? There's a variety of ways you can find it, but I think this is probably the easiest. Go to Google and put in Schedule B search engine. You find the number from census. It will usually 99.9% of the time be the number 1. So here are some of Betty Sue's Hollywood products. We're going to try the license plate. So we clicked it on it and it says, describe your product. It's a license plate. What are the known characteristics? It's made of base metal. And look at that 10-digit number that it's giving me, okay? So do remember in market research, it classifies the HTS, Schedule B, classifies every product in the world. It's the starting point for determining everything. It is required on all your documentation. And if you do any research, it will ask you either for the first 4 or first 6 digits. Here we are on market entry. Now in my class, I cover 2 things, the best way to enter your market, but here we're going to talk just about pricing. How do you figure out your pricing? So this is what is called landed cost. It's exactly what it says. What does it cost to land the product in Australia? So it's starting off, let's say it's the Texas tongue torch sauce in Cactus. It costs $10, but we've got to get from Cactus to the Port of Houston. That costs some money. We've got to ship it across the ocean. That costs some money. We've got to get it into the Port of Sydney. That costs some money. We've got to determine our tariffs and taxes. Maybe we store it. Maybe there's fees for storage. You'll just need to figure this out. And then we'll get it to Fiona Finn's front door. The thing is, it's not priced at $10. By the time Fiona Finn gets it, it's $14 with the landed cost. And she's trying to make a profit like everyone else. She has to be able to sell it at that raised cost. So step 3 is really all about the prices, right? Again, you're going to see your infamous Incoterms. And again, your freight forwarder can help you with this. Now, we're not touching legal. We're moving on to compliance. Remember our important sentence, export here equals import there. What does it take to get your product out of the US? Now, you've already seen this slide. We're going to ask the 4 questions. What is my product? Where is it going? Who is it going to? And how will it be used? The good news about an export license is only 5% needed. So chances are you will fall in the 95%. Here's your second important number, your ECCN, and that will be EAR 99. So do not fear. We'll deal with Betty Sue and her rhinestone-studded night vision goggles, but the vast majority of you will have an EAR 99. And again, even if your product is as simple as paper clips, cannot go to the bad guys. So the other half of this is, what does it take to get my product into the other country? Well, with the rattlesnake olive oil here in the US, you're dealing with the USDA. There is going to be an equivalent government agency for every country you ship to. So for instance, that is MAF in Japan, it's the Bundesministerium in Germany. So look at this. We have our 2 numbers already, and we have 1 sentence. We're now into transportation. There are 4 modes of transportation, and I hope you appreciate my slides there, right? So there is ocean, air, rail, and truck. And of course, your BFF can help you with that. They will help you with rules and regulations, because guess what? They are your BFF. They will help you with documentation, and Robin's going to get in this later. So of course, she's going to be your BFF in explaining this. Now, here we are back on the Incoterms. And again, Robin is going to go in this in more detail, but I kind of wanted to give you an overview of how it works. Now, you're wondering why the FOB is red, because you need to write this down. FOB domestic that you are used to is different than FOB international. Remember, it involves the task, cost, and risk of getting the product from the seller to the buyer, and you need to think before you ship. Okay, so there are 4 basic terms. The E terms are called departure terms, and you may negotiate these terms with your client. So if Fiona Finn and Betty Sue decide on an E term, Betty Sue packages the good, prepares the export docs, and she's done once Fiona Finn picks it up. Fiona Finn handles the rest of the journey. If they decide on an F term, that means the main carriage is unpaid. At this point, Betty Sue gets it from her warehouse to the port of Houston. Now, if they choose a C term, that is main carriage paid. It means that Betty Sue will get it from her warehouse to the port of Houston, across the ocean to the port of import in Sydney. If Betty Sue signs on for a D term, it means she has taken on the responsibility to get the product from her warehouse to Fiona Finn's front door. And again, Robin will share with you the 2 most common ones used. Okay, we are on step number 7, payments and finance. And this is Betty Sue's hot tips on your payments. The goods equal the docs equal the money. It's the documents are the title to your goods, whether they're virtual or paper. So in order for you to get paid, you need to care about your documents and have them in good order. Now, why is this important in payment procedures? You can see there's the least risk and the highest risk. So you can control your risk in payment procedures. Cash in advance is obviously the least. Open account is the riskiest. Now, documentary collections, for those of you that aren't familiar, you'll hear it all the time, but now you should be able to understand it. If the goods equal the docs equal the money, when your docs are presented and cleared where it says on site, you'll get paid. If there's a time element, it'll be when your docs are presented, then the time element. Now, the one thing that's important to know about documentary collections is the banks process it, but they take no responsibility. If you have a higher product or a riskier country, you might want to consider a letter of credit. Basically, with a letter of credit, the bank's credit is substituted for your client's credit. And on YouTube, I have this little corny video if you want to understand a very simplified version of letters of credit. So it was kind of fun. USA used it, translated it to teach bankers in Baghdad. So look at this. We're already here with our 2 numbers, our 2 sentences. Do pay attention because many of you are selling on e-commerce. There's financial things you want to pay attention to, the preferred payment methods, chargebacks, fraud protection. And there's a lot of other features. I have to say Amazon and Shopify have really upped their game, particularly with the fraud protection. So that's worth checking out. If you go to UPS Tradeability, this won't look Greek to you anymore. You can find your harmonized code. You can estimate your landed cost. You can find out if you need an export license, or you can screen for the bad guys. So step 8, the most important step of all, it affects every step of the 8-step process, from the minute you meet to how you communicate to your logo. Believe it or not, this was the original London Olympics logo, to your slogan. In China, finger licking good, translated as eat your fingers off, to your brand, to your negotiations. It is the most important step. So here you have it. Here's what we've covered. It's not that difficult. You just follow the steps because everybody, it's time to get excited about exporting. If Betty Sue can export, you can export, because in her words, somebody somewhere is always buying something. Thank you very much. I hope this helps you solve the riddle of the exporter.
Oh, my dear Elise, I love your presentation. And I hope that everybody listening to this, if you have not inspired them to export right now, I don't know what else can we do. But no, Elise, thank you so much. And just one question before when we stop sharing and then pass over to Robin. As you have gone through this experience and you have done the training and hear from businesses, what is the number one, maybe I'll say the top 2 concerns or mistakes that you hear more from small businesses as they're thinking about exporting? And did those changes or concerns change before the pandemic or after the pandemic when we saw e-commerce booming?
Well, I really think step number 2 and 3 are pretty much tied together, market entry and market research. I always say market entry is the Rubik's Cube because it's really so overwhelming. How do you enter the market? Of course, e-commerce has helped that immensely. I would suggest that you call the U.S., we call them the USAC, the U.S. Export Assistance Center. They're wonderful with helping you move from step 2 into step 3. The rest of them are a little more concrete and you can research and find solutions. But those two, you know, and they go in and out. And if you change a country, it's new research, new budget for a new country.
Yeah, I agree. I also love one of the questions, and I think, thank you, Karen, for responding. We have also businesses that are services, not products, right?
Correct.
And there is also a support, let it be from SBA or US Commercial Services, that can help you and guide you when you're exporting services. In fact, the United States is the #1 exporter of services in the world. Anything from that side, at least, that you want to share?
Well, I'm not sure if you're aware, but XM Bank also has finance options for services.
Yeah.
So the services struggle a little bit because there's no HTS because they don't have a product. But what you do is you follow the HTS of the product you service. And then you go to the USAC, you say, help, I need some research, help, I need some contacts. And then after they help you set that up, they'll connect you with XM Bank and help, I need some finances.
That's awesome. Elise, thank you so much. We really enjoy it. And I hope Betty Sue continues to export and be a successful exporter. So now I'm going to invite Robin to join us. And Robin, as I am playing with the here, adding you here, I know we have, as we're starting, we do have a poll that I'm going to invite everybody to answer, so that as we prepare Robin's presentation and we put to present in presentation mode, let me throw the poll and I'm going to launch it. And I ask everybody, we'll give 30 seconds to answer. Please go ahead and answer and choose and go through here, because after you heard from Elise, Robin, how are you today, by the way?
Yeah, doing great. Happy to be here. Happy to be with everyone. Thank you, Maria.
I know. Thank you so much for being here with us. And we're getting more and more responses. And I do want to get at least more than 50% of the participants. Come on, you can do it. Answer. I'm drinking the coffee for all of you so we can keep going through lunch and presentation. But Robin, very interesting, Elise, presentation, right? And understanding that journey that the small and medium-sized businesses have when we talk about exporting, right? It is a unique, and I know you're going to talk about this, but it's something that adds more value to the business, right?
Absolutely. And that is definitely where I start. So our topic today is tariffs, Incoterms, and more. And I'm going to start with the more so that we can get into why it matters for small businesses.
Exactly. And I'm going to give one last call out for people to respond. We're almost at 75% of respondents. And then I'm going to end it once we'll pass the 75%. One moment, let me see. Okay. We're there. So I'm going to share the results so Robin can.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. And this is not a surprise to me. And before we go to the next slide, maybe I'll give a quick introduction, but real quick, look at this: understanding customs, taxes, rules, and regulations. So that explains why people are here today. So hopefully Elise and I are providing a lot of value there to take a little bit of the mystery outside of this complexity. So super interesting. I'll get into the details of this because we've actually run this question in an official UPS survey, and I'd love to share the results with you so you can see how it varies in just a second. All right. So just a quick introduction on my side. I am a longtime UPSer. I have over 10 years of international experience. So I've launched products internationally for UPS, and I've also spent several years outside of the US, really broadening my perspective, mostly in Europe. And then more recently, I've moved back to the US, and my job at UPS now is really to grow UPS exports from the US. Therefore, it is a great pleasure to be here with you today to help arm you with the information so that you can, again, like Elise said, help solve the riddle of exporters, right? So if we go to the next slide, this is really the survey question or the poll question that you guys just answered. And after speed of delivery, similar to how you guys responded, understanding customs, taxes, rules, and regulations is really top of mind for most small businesses. And again, as I said, that's really why we're here today. We want to start peeling back the onion on both the complexities of international trade, as well as really the awesome opportunity. So if we get into the agenda, we're going to actually start talking about, as I said earlier, why exports matter. So you can go to the next slide, RJ. How exporting works, what you need to do in order to prepare, how to get started, and then we'll get into the terms and definitions, and then we'll close with some next steps. So I hope that you find this complementary to what Elise just shared. And as she was so dynamic and told this amazing story, please don't fall asleep because I don't have a similar story, but it's interesting. And I think, once you are convinced with why exports matter, and we can go to that slide, I think that this will be the most compelling thing for you if you're just getting started. All right, so we'll go to the next slide and why exports matter. So first of all, did you know that 70% of the world's purchasing power is outside the US? And in addition to that, when we talk about buyers in the world globally, most of them are not in the US. In fact, 95% of buyers are outside of the US. So when you start selling your products outside of the US, or you decide to, just know that the opportunity is vast. In addition to that, 2 times the growth trajectory, right? So expanding internationally, you're going to increase your number of buyers, but you're also obviously going to have an opportunity to really twofold growth type of experience here. So this is super awesome. If we go to the next slide, this again, from a US perspective, I believe most of you all are small businesses in the US. If we look at our overall GDP, we see that 13% comes from exports in the US. But when we look at other large economies, look at Germany, look at China, et cetera, we know that there's a tremendous opportunity in front of us for export. And if we go to the next slide, in addition to thinking about growth opportunity for your businesses, there's a lot of other protection. Elise touched on really the insulation against local market fluctuation, right? So you create some stability. So while our economy may be in a downturn, neighboring markets or other regions may be in an upswing. So that helps you to balance your results. In addition, studies have shown that you're going to grow faster. And then lastly, it's really going to offer greater stability because we also see that exporters are 8.5% less likely to go out of business. So lots of benefits to exporting. All right, so now we're going to start getting into how it works. And we're going to keep it really simple because as we progress forward, we're going to get into more complexity. So I think we can fast forward a couple slides. Perfect, thank you. So this is like as simple as you get. And when you talk about a small package or even freight or whatever, the first thing is you're going to create your document, right? You're going to create maybe a shipping label. You're going to put it on the package. You're going to give it to your driver. It's going to, go across the supply chain. It's going to get cleared. And then it's going to get delivered. That's as simple as I can put, how exporting works. Then if you will maintain the simplicity, and we'll go a little bit deeper on the next slide, really the next step is, again, determining what type of service you need. And you're going to think about 3 main things, right? So what kind of quantities are you talking about? What is the urgency of the delivery? So how fast do you need it to get there? And then where is it going, right? So maybe it's heavy and it's not urgent and it's simply crossing a land border. So in our case in the US, well, that can easily go to Canada, for example, on the ground. On the other side, if it's going across the ocean and it's urgent, let's say, you're going to need an air service for that. And then on the flip side, again, if it's going across the ocean, but it's less urgent, maybe it's a lot heavier, a lot of product, then that's likely to go via ocean. All right, so now we're going to start getting into the preparation of exporting. And we'll fast forward a couple slides here. And what I want to highlight here are really a few considerations. So the first consideration is really knowing, if you go to the next slide, what your product is. So we don't have hot sauce here, Elise. Sorry, my example is a little more boring than yours. So let's say that you're manufacturing shoes and you decide, okay, the US business, it's going okay, but now I want to expand internationally. Elise hit on this quite a bit, and I'm going to start high level and we'll get into the details after. But the first thing is you need to know what that product code is. And as she said, you can find this in the HTS. So this is the harmonized tariff schedule. And really, to put it simply and really to reiterate what was said before, this is a number that's given to a specific import item, and it's really going to help identify and classify it. And it's also important because it's used to help to determine the amount of duty and taxes that's going to be required from an import perspective, okay? The key here is you got to get the code right, because that's going to help reduce really customs holds and also help you to be more clear about how much it's going to cost end to end, going back to Lisa's landed cost scenario. All right. The second consideration is you really need to know where the product is going and whether any special rules or regulations exist. And I like at least the example that you gave. There are certain countries that, you know, I didn't know that you couldn't ship paper clips to certain countries, but you need to know that, because if you ship something that you're not allowed to, it's definitely going to get stopped. So it's super important that you know where, you know, the certain destination rules and regulations. Consideration 3, you'll need to know which forms are required. You're almost always going to need a commercial invoice, with the exception of, you know, if you're shipping paper, right, documents or letters. Other than that, you're going to need a commercial invoice. So you can just check that box. I need a commercial invoice. But there are other documents that may be required, and you need to be aware of that, and you need to do the research to figure that out. But as Elise said, I can be your best friend, your BFF. we can figure that out together. All right. So consideration 4. So really the next thing you're going to need to determine, and we talked about this a second ago, is the speed. And that helps you to determine what sort of service you need. And then we're quickly going to go to the last consideration, which is really a compilation of a few things that you need to prepare before you ship. So there are exceptions. I've mentioned some of those. We want to prevent them. So make sure that your product is packaged correctly. The worst thing that could happen is it gets damaged while it's in transit, and then we've got to figure out a way to get it back. We can do that, but obviously you want to eliminate the chances of that happening. You should also consider insurance. This is also something that UPS offers, and as touched on before, the information that is provided throughout the whole process, your address information, the information put on the commercial invoice, all of that really needs to be tightened up and accurate. And that will really ensure that you are prepared to export. Okay, so we're getting a little bit more technical, and we're getting even more. If we go onto the next slide, we're going to transition over to our terms and definitions. All right, so, and I hope you didn't eat lunch already. Take notes, wake up. All right, customs. So simple one, right? So this is really the official department that administers and collects the duties that are levied by a government on imported goods. Then we're going to reiterate the harmonized system code, obviously super important. This is really, again, getting into the tariff nomenclature. These HS codes are used throughout the export process. And this is really a harmonized system, a standardized numerical method really of classifying products. And again, it's used by customs authorities to help classify products, but also to determine duties and taxes. One note, you can find these online. Elise showed you that, but they are updated every now and then. So at least every 5 years. So make sure if you have a copy downloaded that you've got a current one. All right, so then moving on to the harmonized tariff schedule code. So this is a longer code, and Elise showed you an example. I'm going to dive deeper into that. Again, like as you go beyond the 6 digits, it's really a matter of just getting more and more detailed. And in the US, we call this the HTS code, but it is called different things in other countries. All right, the international commercial terms, or as Elise called it, the infamous Incoterms. These really define, as she said, the responsibilities of exporters and importers in the arrangement of shipments. And really, it's all about liability and who's involved at the various stages of the transaction. There are 11, and I'm just going to cover 2 again, because at least the function that I'm in, we're doing door-to-door delivery. So as it relates to delivering a product right at the door, we really focus on 2 main Incoterms, and that's delivery duty unpaid and then delivery duty paid. So we'll start with the DDU scenario. This is where the seller, so if you were selling the shoes, you would be responsible for ensuring that the shipment arrives at the country's destination, so at the door, right? And the actual buyer, so whoever bought that product from you, is going to take the responsibility for any customs charges. So if there are duties and taxes assessed, the buyer is going to be responsible for paying them. Now, imagine you have a B2C type shipment. So if you're selling jewelry, for example, and you sell a necklace to a customer in Germany, and let's say you indicate that you want this to be DDU. That means you want the receiver to pay the duties and taxes. So what's going to happen is either the driver is going to get to your customer's door and say, I need 40 euros. Or if you're using UPS services, we're actually going to email the receiver or even text them and let them know, hey, you can pay online, you owe 40 euros, and then they can go online and they can pay. And then the delivery process is a bit more streamlined. Either way, it works. Okay, if we go to the next set of terms and conditions, we have delivery duty paid. So the difference here is essentially in this scenario, DDP means that the seller is going to be responsible for all aspects of shipping. And this includes the customs clearance and the delivery and the payment of the duties and taxes. In this type of arrangement, the seller is going to assume the financial responsibility for all of the costs, right? And so going back to my example in that situation, it's a bit more streamlined, right? So there's no need for the buyer to pay the driver or for the buyer to go online and pay the duties and taxes. That's all handled up front. We actually provide services, and I think you could find that also on ups.com. Elise showed you the page. You can put in all your details and determine what the landed cost is. So actually the seller could collect it up front and not have to worry about it on the back end. All right. So now moving to the de minimis value. This is, and I love saying that, like try to say that like 5 times in a row, de minimis. It's just fun. It's fun to say it. All right. You guys are all on mute. Feel free to try it. This is really the threshold set by countries under which no duties and taxes are applied. And this is going to vary country to country. So as an example, importing into the US, super flexible. We have a high de minimis, $800. It's easy to trade with the US because, and you probably as consumers haven't experienced having to pay duties and taxes very often because we have such a high de minimis. On the other hand, if we talk about Canada, there's a $40 de minimis. So if you're sending anything over $40, that's when all of this assessment of duties and taxes is required and the consignee would have to pay something. China is 0. So in every circumstance, there's an assessment of duties and taxes. So that's just good for you to know so you understand your buyer's experience when they're purchasing your goods. All right, commercial invoice, we touched on this before, the most important export document, and it helps us to determine, again, what duties and taxes might be owed, and making sure that that information that you put on there is crystal clear is absolutely imperative to make sure that the clearance process is fast. Then we have, and Elise talked a lot about this, the automated export system. So I'll just touch on it briefly. This is really a nationwide system. It is operational at all ports in the United States, all methods of transportation. And it was really designed to assure compliance with enforcement of laws relating to exporting, also to improve trade statistics. And for you, it's just helpful because you don't, if you're sending something with a high value over $2,500, you don't have to report it to multiple agencies. That information could be shared through the AES, and then you're, essentially done from a reporting perspective. And then lastly, on our terms and definitions here, we have the power of attorney. So this is really a legal document used in shipping to grant a customs broker the authority to process, clear the package on your behalf. And you don't always need this, but as an example, if you're shipping to Canada, you would need this if the commodity exceeds $3,000. If you're exporting to like Taiwan, you almost always need this. So again, as I think Elise and I both have pressed on, make sure that you know what's required in terms of the destination that you're shipping to. There's plenty of government trade sites for every country, and you can find out then when the POA is needed, or you can talk to your UPS salesperson as well. Okay, so I'm going to give you now, as we get into tariff codes, a breakdown of the structure of the tariff codes, and then we'll go into an example. All right, so we've hit on this multiple times, so I'm just going to hit, and Elise did too. So very quickly, the structure of the HS code is pretty simple. You have the chapter, that's 10, the heading, which is the 06, and in this example, the subheading is 20. That's your 6-digit HS code. And then for every destination country, there's going to be an additional set of numbers. This can actually even go beyond 10, by the way, depending on the destination. And that's going to, again, vary by the destination country. And if you go to the next slide, I'm going to show you just a quick picture of what the book looks like in the US. And you see that heading and the subheading and the numbers there, again, breaking down rice, very generally is or cereal is a 10, and then rice would be 06. And then you get more and more detailed as you go through and specify what kind of rice you're shipping. And then we'll go to the last slide on tariff codes to break down the difference between the HS and the HTS. So again, you've got the cereal, then you go more detailed with the 4, you have the 06, and which gives you the 4-digit code. And then you have the global HS code adding the subheading, which is the 20. So you go from cereal to rice, then husk brown rice, like very detailed. And then if it fits under that, but it happens to be in the other category, in this example, the way that it would be coded in the US is a 4020. But if it's going to the EU, it's going to be 1799. If it's going to Canada, 0010. So you've got to, if you're shipping to Canada, you need to get your hands on the, the tariff book for Canada, so you can make sure that you're putting the right code information in your documents. All right, last slide on the terms and definitions portion. For duty and tax calculation, there's multiple aspects to help you figure out what that's going to look like. The origin destination, again, there could be a trade agreement that affects whether that is going to, increase the fee or decrease the fee. Next, you have the number of units and the weight. I think that's self-explanatory. The mode of transportation, is it going by air or ground or ocean or rail? And then you've got the product value and the type of value. So that's going to be really, again, getting into your description of goods. What's the HS code? And then lastly, you have the value of the goods. So what is it worth? And then how many of those products are you shipping? All of that together helps to determine what the duty and taxes are at the end of the day. Okay, so in conclusion, we're going to get into very quickly the next steps. So I've just put here just a few links for you. Honestly, if you go to ups.com and you search international shipping, you're going to find everything that you would ever need to know: how to ship, country regulations, customs, etc. Secondly, if you want more support in terms of how to, get started with shipping international, or maybe you just would like to switch services or what have you, please schedule a free virtual consultation with us. there's the link there. And then lastly, we have tons of webinars on similar content as well as additional content. And that URL is also there, ups.com/webinars. All right, so that concludes the information that I plan to share. I do want you to remember 95% of the buyers are outside of the US. So this is one reason and the only reason that I should convince you that it's time to expand, your business and think about exporting. And we are here to help and be your BFFs. So thank you very much for listening.
Right.
Maria.
Thank you so much. Turning it over to me.
Okay, Karen.
So we did have a couple of questions. I want to thank Elise and Robin. I think some of them may have been answered. Robin, from your last slide, what are the duties based on the price of the product, or is there a sliding scale?
Can you read that one more time? Sorry, I didn't see it.
Are the duties based on the price of the product, or is there a sliding scale?
So it's due to a number of things, and I'm not sure I understand the sliding scale, but absolutely the value of each product is going to be assessed in a portion of, or a component of, the actual calculation of the duties and taxes.
Okay.
And if I may add on that, Robin and Elise, also maybe you may have information on that. That's why it's so important to have what you put in your invoice, right? That I think, Robin, that's one of the things when we see when businesses are exporting, your invoice is going to be a key element because that has the cost.
Absolutely.
And then the classification will tell the government where do you fall into that duty piece, and if they have any taxes. So it depends. There's not a sliding scale, it's more your classification and what the governments where you're exporting, what do they have in that value on that part.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the destination, if you're shipping the same product to Canada or China, the value, or the actual amount that you will have to pay is going to vary.
Yeah.
So all of that information is important. Sorry, Karen.
No. And whether we have a free trade agreement with them,
Yes.
Obviously, that's going to
point.
change it as well. So are some countries higher than others?
In terms of the amount that you have to pay, yeah, absolutely. And sometimes governments intentionally try to dissuade imports of certain goods. So they may increase a tariff, right? So that American consumers, for example, would buy more from an American business as opposed to purchasing goods from another country. So yes, absolutely.
They are going to be varied. Every country has their own tariff rates. So Stanley, I am the owner of RGS Logistics and offer courier transportation, movement of goods and logistics services. What are my opportunities in exporting?
So I'll take that one, and then Elise, please jump into if you have connections. Stanley, your opportunity there can be if you have logistics services to offer to other small businesses to be able to help them in that process. If I understand your question correctly, and be aware and be able to help educate your customers about what to expect and how to manage that information. Thank you for being an entrepreneur. That's awesome.
I would like to also add that when you have a foreign customer, that's considered exporting. So when you're helping foreign companies as well, that could be considered exporting.
Mm-hmm.
So last one.
I'd like to add
Elise, sorry.
I could.
Yes.
The poll, 72% were concerned about duties, tariffs, and taxes. And since Betty Sue is an export cheerleader, I would like to add one thing. The first time you do it is going to be hard. Once you figure out your export here, you'll pretty much have that figured out. Your import there will change. But I promise, once you do it the first time, you'll see these are the 4 or 5 things I really need to pay attention to. And when you do it the second time, you'll see those are the 4 or 5 or 6 things again. So do not panic, because it takes 1 or 2 times, and then you'll have it in your head. Okay, this is what I need to do. to get it into the other country. Go exporting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You've got it. Absolutely. And there's my dog.
So I think the last question, which I think is very interesting, is how do free trade zones play a role for small businesses? And that I think, and thank you, Don, for the question. There's two things to take into consideration. One, many small businesses here in the US import raw materials to be able to transform them and sell them into the country. That's one area, right? Of course, here we're talking about exporting. There's a lot of importing that comes into the US, and that's how you can transform a product, use the free trade zone here to transform a product, and then export it from the free trade zone to another location. So that's a way that small businesses can handle that part. And then the second one, if it is free trade zones that you're using outside the US, that might be another model, but I don't know, Elise, Karen, or Robin, if you have anything to add on that part from a free trade zone perspective. I think more about importing and then exporting to the other locations, but if anyone wants to add anything else on that.
No, I think you hit it. Absolutely. You know, you can bring goods into a free trade zone and then ship it out, and then you don't have to pay duty for importing. Yeah, obviously that's more what it's about. We've got a couple more questions. We're a logistic company, primarily offering transportation services from ports to door. If we decide to handle the export processes, will we need special licensing?
It depends. I hate that answer, right? It depends. But if you're going to handle the brokerage process, yes, you need to have that information. How are you going to help on that process? So transportation is not just the movement of the good. You have to handle all the documents that Betty Sue and Robin share with you. You need to have all that expertise. So it's not a special license. If you have a brokerage, you have to have an understanding of what is going to touch the product, and when are you going to touch the authorities? So what information are you needed? Some countries do regulate some of the transportation companies, that it be by customs or by, in some instances, the Commerce Department. Different countries have different regulations, who's the regulatory body. So you need to have awareness of what is expected of you. And I think we're running out of time. I know last week I didn't keep it on time, not very UPS and me. So we promise to those questions that you have in there, we're following up and we'll send you the answers on that part. Thank you so much for giving us those informations. So Karen, I'll turn it over to you to close over. Dear Robin and Elise, you were awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, we want to thank our speakers, Elise Erickson, also known as Betty Sue Export Queen with Export Connector. So thank you so much. It's always so entertaining to watch her. And Robin Usherwood, UPS Director of Marketing. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. So please be sure to, here's some resources that we have additionally on the screen, and you'll get copies of this that will be included in the slide decks that come to you a little bit later. And then next, I think we've got our next session, which will be module 3. Again, same time, same place, next Tuesday, July 25th. This will be on understanding supply chain and logistics for e-commerce. Here are our topics. So we'll be concerning on e-commerce. One of our commercial service specialists that was in the e-commerce lab will be joining us. And so we can't wait for everyone to come back again next week. And thank you so much for these, all these questions that you've been asking. And again, here we've got the UPS Ignite program on the screen. Maria Luisa,
yes.
If there's anything else? Thank
no,
you.
I know this is just to let businesses know that there's a community around them. This is what we do too for small businesses. Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone. And I know people are saying we're just getting started. We will follow up and give you the questions. These are our partners. Thank you again for allowing us to be here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.